Hi everyone, I hope you're all well and welcome to episode 96 of the James Layton Fitness Podcast. Now in this specific episode we'll be discussing should females and males train in the same way when they have goals for fat loss. So hopefully this should really clear up a lot of confusion around is there any changes that need to be made between the two different sexes when they have goals for fat loss. So firstly we need to take a step back and look at our main objectives within the fat loss phase. We really have two main objectives, the first of which is obviously to maximize fat loss and the second of which is to maintain as much muscle mass as possible, and both objectives apply to both males and females. And this is probably one of the biggest misconceptions that I see today is for whatever reason females disregard this second objective, maintaining as much muscle mass as possible, and as such they apply a lot of their focus to cardio training as opposed to having weight training as the foundation of their routine to maintain as much muscle mass as possible. And this is really important for females to actually have the figure they're after. For females to have strong glutes and legs, for example, they need to have weight training as the foundation. They need to be able to maintain as much muscle mass as possible. Additionally, this will help to preserve their metabolic rate within the fat loss phase and allow them to lose body fat on higher calories. So it's really critical that both males and females have weight training as the foundation of their routine to maintain as much muscle mass as possible, and then we're merely adding cardio and or decreasing calories to create the energy deficit needed for fat loss. So that kind of main overarching principle applies to both males and females. However, there are a few nuances which apply to females in particular, which I'll discuss within this podcast. So firstly, with regards to the weight training, even though it will be relatively similar between the two sexes, I would still suggest having slightly more volume sets and exercises for the females' lower body and glutes. Typically this is an area that females like to develop more than males, and as such I'd like to place slightly more volume to the glutes and legs within the training program, as opposed to a male's routine which will have a relatively even split between upper body and lower body. So that will be the one tweak I'd make in terms of the weight training component. However, the types of exercise will be very similar, built around the main key compound exercise, things like squats, deadlifts, bench press, overhead press, or variations of these, and then some accessory work within the routine as well. So those actual exercises stay very similar. You may have more hip thrusts, glute bridges, etc. within the female routine as opposed to the male routine, but on the whole very similar, except for that one change of slightly more volume to the glutes and lower body for the female. Now the second change will be in terms of cardio. Now first, it's just critical to realise that within a fat loss phase, because we're trying to maintain as much muscle mass within the fat loss phase, not only do we need to have weight training as the foundation, but we're trying to keep calories as high as possible, still making fat loss progress and performing minimal cardio, because this will allow us to better maintain our gym performance, our strength in the gym, as opposed to going very low calorie and then cardio every single day of the week. You will lose a lot of strength. As such, you'll lose a lot of muscle mass within the fat loss phase. So therefore we're trying to, if possible, keep calories as high as we can while still seeing fat loss progress, and then using as little cardio as possible. However, by default, females just require more cardio to create the energy deficit needed for fat loss. Typically females just find it that much more difficult to lose body fat, and as such they just require more cardio. So keep that in mind. So even though we're striving for as little cardio as possible, by default females just require more cardio needed to create the energy deficit needed for fat loss. That's just an important consideration. And then secondly, total calories. So even though we're striving for as many calories as we can to, while still seeing fat loss progress to maintain our gym performance, again, females just require less calories to do body fat, just because of their physiology, just because of hormones. They just require less calories, more cardio needed to create the energy deficit needed for fat loss. However, once we have the routine in place, the same principle applies. We're only going to make changes to the calories and or cardio when you reach a fat loss plateau. So both of them are still going to be striving for approximately 0.5 to 1% weight loss per week. If this isn't achieved, this is when calories either drop and or cardio increases. So the same principles apply to both the male and female. However, their starting point for both, for females, will be slightly more cardio, slightly less calories, but as soon as we have that starting point in place, As soon as the plateau has been reached, we'll then drop in calories by approximately 10 to 15% from fats and carbohydrates, or a combination of both, and or increasing expenditure from cardio. So same principle applies to both. As soon as you reach a plateau, make a change and then continue doing the same thing until the next plateau is reached. So you're really trying to use the minimal effective dose to bust through each plateau, and that's why a 10 to 15% drop in calories isn't a massive amount, but it should be enough to bust through the fat loss plateau. Now the other change to think about is just the female's menstrual cycle. Obviously at certain times of the month they will maintain water, therefore you need to be trying to keep this in the back of your mind when you're measuring your progress. Appreciate that there will be fluctuations on the scale because of this water retention. Therefore, I would still suggest measuring yourself and weighing yourself once per week, but keep that in the back of mind and try to compare month to month blocks as well. Try to not compare yourself when you're holding on to water compared to other times where you don't have the same water retention. So that's another consideration to think about. Whereas males, it's very black and white. If they're making progress, keep doing the same thing. If they plateau, that's your cue to make a change. With a female, it's a little bit more complex because of their menstrual cycle, because of that water retention at certain times of the month, and as such I would suggest still weighing yourself, measuring yourself weekly, but again thinking about month to month blocks, thinking about weighing yourself, measuring yourself when you're not holding on to water, and try not to compare that to another time when you're holding on to water as well. So hopefully that's been useful. So in short, there's a lot of similarities between the two. However, I would suggest slightly more sets and exercises for the lower body, the glutes for the females, slightly more cardio for females, slightly less calories to begin with for females. But once that's in place, same principles apply. We're trying to eke out as much progress as possible on that current starting setup, and then only making a change to drop calories and or increase expenditure from cardio when you reach a plateau, because that will allow us to better maintain muscle mass within the fat loss phase, as opposed to being ultra aggressive with the energy deficit and losing lots of strength and therefore a lot of muscle mass within the fat loss phase. So hopefully that's been useful. If you're still yet to download my free book, How to Set Up a Nutrition Plan, if you go to James Layton, Layton Fitness.co.uk, you'll see a tab at the top of the page called free book, and you can download that immediately. I look forward to speaking to you next week. Thank you very much.